Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting the Super Mutant for Fallout the board game. This is just showing that I actually primed it without trimming the flash, and then after priming it, decided to trim the flash, but there's not very much, which is why I originally didn't trim it, but I can't help it. I gotta trim it, but as you can see, there's gonna be very little here. It's actually not too bad at all. In fact, I'm already almost done. Now, in the game, the Super Mutant's kind of interesting. I think he's probably the most underutilized character. Essentially, he can heal if he gets some radiation, which is kind of okay, kind of not. So for the skin, I'm going to do Castellan green and Deathguard green as a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm just going to kind of put that down on all of the skin except his toes, which I forget to do. So I'm going to do that off screen much later on once I actually realize it, really putting into those foot wraps. But if you are doing this, do not forget his toes. They are poking out. I imagine he just likes to feel the dirt and sand on his toes, so he doesn't quite want to cover those up. But either way, this is kind of a darker green, so there are a lot of different, looking up Super Mutants, just like all these other characters, there are, the ghouls specifically, there are a lot of different shades and variation, depending on lighting, depending on if it's Fallout 4 or Fallout 3, or even one of the earlier Fallouts. And so I decided to kind of try and hit the middle a bit. Now, this guy is obviously based off Strong from Fallout 4, so I'm going to mostly be focusing on that, especially for his armor, but really I just wanted to have kind of a range of dark to light, with light just being a spackle, so you'll see that in a bit, but overall he's a little bit darker of a Fallout Super Mutant. And if you want it lighter, you could just mix more green in, or just not even use Castellan green and use something else. Athonian Camoshade, this is just a shade, a wash I'm gonna dump all over his skin again. Now I'm gonna use my regiment brush here to put it on fairly thick, because I really want the muscle definition here. However, I'm going to continue to play with it until it's dry, so that it doesn't really pool down too much. So as you can see, I've covered him, and now I'm just going to keep wiping it so it doesn't pool out. Okay, so now I have added some more of the lighter green in there, and it's not quite pure Deathguard green, but it's closer, but it's also very watered down. It's kind of like a very heavy highlight. I did this with the ogres in Massive Darkness, so you may have seen me do the skin there, and I really like the kind of exaggerated muscle definition it gets. So overall I'm pretty good with that. I just realized I haven't spoken about the actual sculpt here, so I really like that he's leaning to the side. I think that's very unusual to do with a character. When I did Moria, I also commented on that, because she's kind of leaning forward to the side. I don't know, I think it's always kind of nice. So that's kind of cool, but he's not really using that power sledge at all. When it comes to this, this kind of, it's not a dry brush, but it's not really a highlight either. It's kind of a mix. I do it pretty rough. I mean, this is skin after all, and I'm not trying to be super exact, and it's not like I typically paint to those standards either. So, I painted him, within a day, which I don't always do, so that's pretty nice. Be sure to get the feet here, and again, those toes are gray. You should also do the toes when you're done here, but as you can see, I'm mostly covering probably about maybe 90% of the skin, the majority of it, just leaving the crevices a little bit darker. So here's that spackle I talk about with that brighter green. So I'm just taking straight up Moot Green. You can see in the picture here, especially like around his shoulders and on his stomach, he has like these splotches of brighter green. Now this is with the flashlight shown on him, so they're not normally this bright, though it's also a dark there too. But really, I wanted this kind of, with the radiation theme and everything else, I wanted just to kind of plop some green on him. Real quick, a 1-to-4 ratio between Stormhost Silver and Administratum Gray, and that's really to get this kind of center plate here. In the picture I'm about to show, you can kind of see it, but it's a very light silver, as opposed to this, which is the Leadbelcher, which is a very dark silver. So as you can see here, you can see the little bit there, and then the kind of the bandolier thing he's got going on there. So I'm starting that with a base coat of silver. He also has a lock in the back. I don't know what's up with that or what purpose that is, but there you go. So there's the Leadbelcher on that as well, and I'll kind of touch it up. Now I wasn't sure if this was leather or metal or what, but I decided it's a metal plate, mainly because of the spikes, I feel. But you could probably paint it either way, though a lot of the Super Mutant armors in the game have metal kind of arm guards. Here's some more Administratum gray. This is just pure Administratum gray as kind of his kind of torso cloth here. And there's a little bit kind of hanging out underneath the kind of wires that are there, the kind of barbed wire. Now, I always paint deepest to highest raised, and typically largest, and then do the fiddly bits, the small parts, afterwards. Some people like to do the small parts afterwards and would rather paint the kind of barbed wire there first. You can if you want, but I feel you have to be careful when doing that, and then careful when painting around it, and then you end up touching up both. And I don't know. I don't have much luck with it, so I tend to go the deepest recess, or the lowest part, and then build up. So skin, then cloth, then barbed wire on top. But I'm using the character brush here. It's really easy to kind of go around. So I'm starting with copper as the base coat for the barbed wire here, but I'm gonna dirty it up. If you recall my Brotherhood Outcast, the first one I did, when I just kind of dirtied up kind of pretty much all the metal, I'm gonna do the same here. I got a few more tools of the trade, a few different kind of technical paints from a game set that I bought from Vallejo that you'll see that I'm pretty excited to use, and I was pretty surprised with how it turned out, though I wasn't prepared for it either. If you ever get a technical paint, feel free to, if you have either a mini you don't like, or some other miniatures that are just used to trying to practice on, or some Reaper bones or something like that, I would suggest doing that, just because, you know, they have different textures and different flows and consistencies that you might not be prepared for, or that might look different on once it's put onto other paint. So just something to keep in mind. But for me, I'll just put it on my miniature and pray. So here's kind of the first one. This is Rust, which I'm going to dry brush on, and it is a very bright orange, and it is kind of chalky. Like, it's about as, you can kind of see it there. It does have a slight texture to it, which I was impressed with, because when I first poured it out, I didn't think it had any. Seraphim Sepia, this is just to kind of dirty up that cloth and kind of bring the color to closer to where I want it anyway. I'll just kind of do a simple highlight afterwards, and that'll pretty much be it. But yeah, that rust went on really well. I was really surprised, because again, I'd never used it before, and in fact, taking it out of the, you know, the little dropper, I didn't notice anything, but it definitely does add a little bit. So this Necron Compound's just there for some scuff marks and to bring out the silver a little bit. So I'm going to put it on kind of the Bandolier, and then I noticed it didn't really show up on that lock, so I added some Null Oil real quick, and then re-added the Necron Compound. Even though, and maybe I just don't have any luck, but even with the Leadbelcher, I struggled to highlight even the darkest silver with a lighter silver. It just doesn't, at least to my eye and the lighting, it doesn't ever look like it's really doing anything. Like, I can't tell if I painted it or not. So I tend to throw some known oil on there, and then highlight it up from there. That being said, Agrax Earthshade for this one. I kind of got this idea because I didn't know if it was kind of like a leather piece or a metal piece when I was first looking at it and kind of thinking about what to paint. And so then I figured, well, I'll just make it kind of more brownish anyway. So that's what I did there. I'm going to go ahead and bring that wash over onto the barbed wire just to get a little bit of definition as it rests into the pools there. So rust again for the base coat here. Here's kind of a zoomed in look. As you can see, there's a lot of rust. This is pretty much all rust. A tiny bit of metal, some Verdigris, that kind of, you know, blue kind of deterioration that happens to metal. So that's on there, so I get to really have fun with this. Kind of like the Brotherhood Outcast, I'm just going to layer upon layer of nastiness. So here's this dry rust, and again, you saw me kind of move it with my finger. I was not prepared for how watery it was. And then when I first put it on, I didn't even realize, but it actually has little tiny particles in it, little tiny raised bits that really show up once you paint over it. And so I'm going to add it here too, and then I'm going to add a little bit of Stormhost Silver onto the edges for like some scuff marks there. So now I'm going to add some rust back over it, and that'll really kind of build up where those little bits are and really add a lot of texture to it. And then I'm going to cover it in some Agrax Earthshade to, again, just really bring that out. Here's this Verdigris, and again, I wasn't prepared for how heavy this applies, but actually I think it looks really good, properly watered down and applied. I don't know if I'm applying it properly, but either way, I think it looks really good. I'm pretty happy with it. And a little splash of color, surprisingly, but I think I don't know, I think it just looks fairly nice. So I kind of go heavy on it. I don't know if I should have maybe gone lighter. It's, you know, do it to taste. So here's some flat earth. This is for the cloth there. And oh, what I didn't mention is I did swap out to a little bit of metal that I added to those at the very end when I was talking about how much I added. That was some Stormhost Silver, just kind of added lightly, just add a little bit of metal. So that's about the only metal you're seeing on there. So again, at this point you are painting around pretty much everything that is painted. And one thing I didn't notice when painting this, so keep this in mind, is there is a little bit of this kind of cloth on his front and side above the rope that I didn't notice. So you can paint that now or you can paint it after the rope. Either way, you should paint it soon so you still have the paint available, but I didn't really notice, so it's whatever. Agrax Earthshade, just gonna plop that on. There's a lot of kind of places for it to pool to just give me some free definition really quick, and then I'll just highlight it up. So I'm using buff here for the rope. It's a little bit of a lighter rope. To me, it's what I think of when I think of a rope. I don't typically think of some more the orange ones that I saw a lot of in Massive Darkness. I kind of think of this color here. And it matches the artwork that I chose to base it off of, and I think just looks nice and is a brighter color, which he's fairly dark as a miniature. In fact, looking at him from the board, like from board distance, from tabletop distance, you notice the rope, and that it's like a defining feature, which I wasn't expecting, but I don't mind either because I think it looks kind of nice. Mainly because it's not just perfectly straight and symmetrical because of how he's leaning. It's kind of angled up, which I think is kind of neat, I guess, and just adds a little bit of visual, flair when it's not so even. Looks a little bit more realistic. That was a real quick highlight there, and then again I'm going to add some Agrax Earthshade. So you could probably do the Earthshade afterwards onto the rope. Now this is just that buff, and again I'm spackling it just on the bottom half, 2/3. Okay, so I mixed Mechanicus Standard Gray and Light Green Blue. An odd combination, but I think it worked out well, and it's about a 1-to-1. The Light Green Blue is actually pigmented enough to where it doesn't get just overwashed in the dark gray, which is something I was worried about. So I planned on a half and half, but if it wasn't going to work out and if it was too dark and gray and dingy, I was just going to probably do a 2-to-1 and just kind of do it by eye and update my ratio. But I was really surprised with how well the light gray held up. So this is based off of the wrap you see. This is just some Known oil thrown in on there. The very first picture I showed, he has these kind of foot wraps, and so I'm kind of basing it off of that color. Again, super foldy, and so those really add a lot. Here's some Elfic Flesh. This is actually my 5th time trying the eyes, so I'm not showing you all of the attempts, and in fact, I don't show you the pupils on this. Some clear orange. His eyes have a kind of orange hue to them that kind of, they don't quite glow, but it seems to spread from his eyes, so I tried to recreate that, and then I just added a little Abaddon black, whatever black you have, just a little pupil in there. I had to get really close to do it. After 5 times, I wasn't about to try for a 6th, so I didn't film it. My apologies. This, I'm just highlighting it back up to the base color. I'm not going to do anything else besides that, so they'll stay kind of the dingy color that they are, because I'm going to kind of cover it up soon anyway. Averland Sunset, this is for the kind of handle of the sledge, the power sledge, but it also is a little trigger, and then whatever the heck that is poking up at a 45-degree angle there for at the end. This is right there, that little kind of end part. It's probably the hardest part to paint on this miniature. Still wasn't hard. If I can do it, you can do it. Pretty easy. So I'm going to cover the rest in Leadbelcher. Literally, it's pretty much just 2 colors, but then I'm going to add some colors to it. In fact, on the actual sledge part where you hit the person in the face with, if you're lucky, or you chose the head and vats, I'm going to add even more. So you'll see that soon, but I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. And again, A weapon with 2 colors that has all the detail, really kind of nice. I don't mind that at all. It means it just paints up quicker than you would expect. I mean, this guy is full of detail, and I was able to finish him in relatively quick time just because of how easy he is and because a lot of the colors are shared, which is kind of cool. A little bit there, and again, be careful of his kind of fingers there, but I didn't even have to touch it up, so pretty easy. So here I'm just adding some rust, just to add a little bit of color variation, and it matches the concept art a bit more. Here's some Agrax Earthshade, so I'm making these kind of brown. Again, that's how it typically looks. There's some shiny bits and some that are much more dirty and nasty, and so I'm just kind of following that. Here's that dry rust again. So I'm adding, it'll add some texture, some gunk. I'm adding it kind of near where pieces meet, thinking, you know, maybe it was not, you know, not quite cleaned there, you know, something like that. And then I'm going to dry brush on that Necron Compound, just add some scuff marks, and blood for the blood gods. This is the first time using blood. I actually really like how this looked, so I'm just kind of bringing it up, and a little bit of splatter, a little bit of, you know, nastiness, you know, it hit some guy in the face. Some orange brown. I told you I was going to kind of put something over the foot wraps there, and there it is. Again, he's going to be dirty. He's in the desert. And Baneblade Brown on the base. We're moving on to the base already. Now, I will say, back to the blood effects, that the blood for the blood god is kind of shiny on its own. It kind of has that blood effect. However, it will lose it if you matte varnish it. So in the future, I covered it with a gloss coat, but in the future I would add it afterwards and just hope it doesn't rub off. I'm going to try that next time probably. Okay, so Moot Green on the edge, and then Astrogranite Debris, and I'm adding that kind of in the front here, and I'm adding a bit more than I do on some of the others. I try to make it different on each one. Okay, just some regular Elmer's glue, some, I think it's PVA glue or whatever. Add some grass. This Nuln oil I would not add in the future. I know a lot of people do, but I didn't like how dark it made it. I would have had to, I think, repaint. I don't know. I didn't like it. Administratum gray dry brush. So he's a little bit darker than the rest is because it doesn't show up as well. Kind of disappointing, but they still fit in, I think, quite well. But I would not do it again. You can do it if you wish. I guess you can do whatever the heck you want. I mean, I don't care. Cover the glue, or cover the base in glue and do a whole bunch of it. You know, don't go light here. And getting in between the legs there is kind of hard. Make sure you don't make it go above his on his feet or whatever, because it'll stick. So I added some larger kind of coarse turf, and then the earth and burnt grass mix of the fine turf. The purity seal is just a matte varnish. Now again, this is matte varnish, and then I added some gloss coat onto the blood to bring that kind of shininess back up a bit. But this is it. This is the final miniature. I really enjoyed painting him. I thought he was actually quite easy to paint, and coming from Stuffed Fables back to him was a huge kind of like, wow, there's some detail here that I was really impressed with. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. I always do appreciate that. It helps the video, it helps the channel, and helps me know I'm doing something right. Let me know in the comments below if you do have any questions, or if you have any comments maybe on some of my methodology. I am going to be putting the paint list again down in the description below with a painting guide that I'm about to write up, so it'll be a little late because I have to go back to work, but that is okay. I will write it, and that'll be on my Patreon, so you can look for it there if you wish. I'll kind of go into detail a bit about why I chose certain things and put it in a better order now that I'm looking back on it than painting it when I, you know, just kind of free-handed it. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. I always appreciate it, and I will talk to you guys again real soon.